Welcome to the Doom Scroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Hanna Belinsky, and my co-host,
Amanda Stevens,
two writers, political by necessity, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our news feeds from the last week. I'm Hanna Belinsky, and this week we're doing part one of a little year-end recap of the story from 2025 that most stuck with us, in addition to chatting just a bit about current events. It's another year coming to a close. Amanda, are you the kind of person to make resolutions?
Absolutely.
You are?
Yeah.
Do you stick to them? Have you always pulled through?
So the way that my parents always taught me to do this, and the way that I still enjoy doing this, is to do it kind of like shotgun style. Meaning, like, you make a huge list of, like, a million different things, and we categorize it in terms of, like, here's a bunch of stuff that I would like to achieve, like, in my personal life. Here's a bunch of stuff that I would like to achieve at work.
Okay.
Here's a bunch of stuff I would like to achieve in my home, in my reading, or whatever. And then, at the end of the year, you just check off however many you got. But since you put down, like, 80 or whatever...
You're bound to do a few.
You're right. There's a lot less pressure on, like, no, I didn't meet my goals.
Yeah.
And then we make a whole big deal out of, we would sit down and look over our New Year's resolutions and just kind of, like, pat each other on the back for, like, wow, here's the ones I did, and I didn't do this, but I did do this. Like, if you did something related or why you didn't do that.
Very nice.
And then make a whole bunch of new ones. And I really enjoy doing that because it gives me some motivation throughout the year.
Yeah. Before we get to chatting about my story of the year, let's talk a little bit about what other news we've been scrolling through lately.
Yeah.
I've been seeing quite a lot about American forces seizing a big oil tanker, the Skipper, off the coast of Venezuela, with Washington claiming the vessel was under sanctions since 2022 and was associated with terrorist and narco-trafficking networks. Venezuela just sees it as theft of their natural resources because there was a bunch, like many barrels of crude oil on this tanker.
Which the United States has said that it will keep.
Yes.
After going through the legal process.
Whatever
I
that
don't know what that
means.
means. What does it mean? Okay.
Considering all of the events leading up to this, the pressure they've been applying on Nicolas Maduro, the regular bombing of so-called drug boats, the closure of Venezuelan airspace, seizing the Skipper seems like more than just sanctions enforcement. What is your read on the situation?
Where to begin? I mean, sanctions enforcement feels to me like a high school bully that's taking your lunch money. And then they're like, oh, this is a security fee. Like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, for what?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean sanctions enforcement? When did you start doing this?
Yeah.
Like, why weren't you doing that before?
Pulling that out of your back pocket.
I feel like I need to say, because we're always coming on here being like, why is Trump always going after Maduro? I do want to say, like, I don't think Maduro is a good person.
No,
right?
I don't think so either.
He's a bad person. That being said, this is just an attack ultimately on Venezuela and Venezuelans.
Pretty blatant, isn't it?
Right? Like, and especially like, oh, well, we took this oil tanker because you shouldn't be selling oil, but we will be keeping the oil for ourselves. Really, I think they're right to be like, this is another incident of, like, the United States has a long history of just taking resources from South America for whatever reason.
And getting away with it.
The Maduro called it piracy.
Yeah.
And I think that was the right read.
He's not wrong.
Right read. I think all of these are just kind of excuses.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of this is excuses for, like, what we've seen a lot of in 2025. If we're looking at this as a year recap episode, but in current events, right?
Yeah.
Of big egos, of leaders trying to accomplish their own personal missions at the price of many normal people.
Yes.
And I think that the conflict between the United States and Venezuela is a really good example of this.
Yeah, of thing swinging. Is that radio friendly enough?
That's radio. I think that's radio friendly. Yeah, just kind of, ego swinging.
Yes. The other thing to catch my eye this week was right here at home in Taiwan.
Oh, yeah.
Court proceedings for former Taipei mayor and Taiwan People's Party leader Ko Wen-je resumed last Thursday at the Taipei District Court. So far, they've presented evidence and testimony for all 11 of the defendants involved in the Core Pacific City property redevelopment scandal and the embezzlement of political funding.
If you don't follow the news, we didn't cover this because it was covered on our regular news reporting.
Yeah.
But Ko Wen-je was arrested for embezzlement of, like, huge amounts of money
Yes.
during his presidential campaign.
Correct.
Spent personally and frivolously.
Evidently, Ke and some other defendants want the trials streamed in real time, and they're invoking a recent amendment to Taiwan's Court Organization Act that allows trials involving major public interest or high-profile cases to be broadcast rather than recorded to be released after the fact. What do you think his angle is here?
I feel like of the reading material available, I tend to agree with the train of thought that this is a party tactic, a TPP party tactic or assault on using the language of reform to try to complicate court proceedings.
Yeah.
On the other hand, like I do agree that, and actually we're going to be getting into this with what you want to talk about.
Right.
Later.
It is relevant.
It is relevant. I think when it comes to like live streaming judicial hearings, there need to be really strict rules, and I don't think that it's something that can be applied lightly. Taiwan has an okay system, I think, of like we're going to release the recordings of the proceedings shortly after it happened.
Yeah, I think that's
in my
fair
mind.
enough.
I think that's a pretty safe bet for public transparency. Though I can understand why people might argue that does give you time to like edit tapes.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, a lot of the opposition to this is that public pressure is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Right? The public deserves to know.
Yeah.
There is an aspect of transparency here that I agree with. But on the other hand, when it comes to witnesses that might be testifying against the defendant or for the defendant,
it's potentially dangerous to them. Yeah.
In an era of doxing and in an era of political extremism, and Taiwan is not exempt from that, although we haven't seen things go quite to the extremes that we have in other countries.
No.
But it is a country that is getting more polarized. I think that it is good to be able to offer people the safety of being able to testify in the moment anonymously.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's treading very, very tricky territory to this concept of cameras in the courtroom.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling, just based on the people who want them in there, I think most of the time they assume that will help their case somehow. So that's already, muddling things a little bit.
I think that's the other thing about this is like, this is not a case in which people have been wanting this.
Right.
The Taiwanese people have not been asking for this to be publicly, like, there's not a huge outcry of people saying, show us the courtroom.
Yeah. In the case of Ko Winta, I get the feeling he kind of has main character syndrome. I think he has outsized ideas of how this would help his public image that maybe aren't true.
I would also add this last thing. I don't think that the party asking for it, the TPP, can be held to be acting in good faith. The TPP released a recording of questioning that didn't say it was Ko Winta being questioned, but was published in such a way so that people would be led to believe this. And then under scrutiny and under investigation, I believe it was revealed to be generated. And they then later had to come out and say like, oh, well, this is just an example of like what could be happening behind closed doors.
Snake stuff.
And that's what I'm saying is like, I don't think we can trust that they're acting in good faith. And that's something that we need to be careful about in this era of AI.
Well, this will be relevant after the jump when we get into
your story of the year.
Yes, my story of the year. So this week, I want to recap the assassination of Charlie Kirk on September 10th.
Yeah, we touched on it very obliquely.
Yeah, very, very carefully, carefully. When we brought it up on the program, it was within the context of the free speech meltdown that ensued in the wake of his death, including the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel's show, although that was put back on air just a couple of weeks later. As far as how the actual murder case is going recently, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty, and, not unlike Ko Winta, Kirk's widow, Erica, is calling for full transparency. But the gunman, Tyler Robinson, his legal team is asking the judge to ban cameras in the courtroom and generally place limits on media access to the trial. This is just such a high-profile case, and they're concerned too much media attention could interfere with Robinson's right to a fair trial. While I think Ke is mostly delusional, thinking that having his trial broadcast will sway public opinion, I think it's pretty obvious that transparency will work in the prosecution's favor in Robinson's case, especially in such a polarized U.S. political climate. It's been more than 3 months now since Tyler Robinson sniped Charlie Kirk in the neck from a rooftop while Kirk was speaking at an event at Utah Valley University. Can you believe it? 3 months have already gone by. Naturally, the news cycle has mostly gone quiet on the matter because we're just getting legal updates at this point. What I really want to talk about, though, are all these conspiracy theories that have been circulating since the assassination and the implications in a country where extreme political beliefs are gaining more traction than I would have ever been able to imagine before Kirk was killed. Just a quick rundown. One of the most persistent theories circulating online claims that the U.S. military was somehow involved in the shooting. This idea largely stems from social media posts by conservative commentator Candace Owens, who's kind of a crackpot these days.
I don't know. Yeah, can we still call her in good faith? Can we call her a conservative commentator?
I'm being fair, I guess. I can't just say crackpot Candace Owens, but
we're not allowed to say
subtext.
That, I think.
But she suggested that an email she received from someone claiming to be in the military implied they were potentially involved. A second, related conspiracy theory suggests that the shooting was a government-ordered political assassination. And proponents of this theory argue that federal agencies or officials orchestrated the killing to silence Kirk or manipulate public opinion. This theory has circulated mostly on fringe forums and highly partisan social media spaces, and it's feeding off the high-profile nature of Kirk's public persona, and the lack of information about the incident. So, Amanda, I just want to know, have you heard or rather scrolled past any of these theories?
The one that I have heard closest to is about that it was a government-ordered political assassination.
Yeah. Everybody always wants to say that about assassinations.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really common immediate go-to in the United States. Now, again, like with some other topics we've discussed in the past, unfortunately, I think that there is precedent as for reasons why people would go to this because, I would agree. We have discovered post events happening that the government has been involved in more assassinations than they would like to admit.
Exactly.
So I know why people would go to this.
Yeah, it's a very natural kind of assumption to make.
Now, I didn't hear that exact. I didn't hear that exact framing, but I did hear from some more partisan friends of mine on the right and the left believing that the government might have had something to do with this.
Yeah.
It's not really a conspiracy theory, in my opinion, but you can be the judge of that. The one that I subscribed to more than that was that the shooter was a graper, which we're going to be getting into.
That's right.
I don't know if it's a conspiracy. I don't know if it counts as a conspiracy theory, though, because of what we have learned about him.
I know. It's our own kind of personal speculation,
I guess now
really.
I said you could be the judge of it, but I guess the listeners will be the judge of it. And that to me makes the most sense based on what we know about the person at this point in time.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about this, not because I believe in this stuff, the idea that the government got a hit on Kirk, but because I know, like you, some people who do believe this. And I've noticed that ever since Kirk was shot, a small pocket of people from my hometown are consistently posting content related to these theories, especially the ideas being peddled by fringe political commentator Nick Fuentes, who believes it was because Charlie Kirk was just on the verge of becoming anti-Israel that he was then, quote, taken out.
Can I interrupt here for a quick second to add something? I forgot to tell you about this. It's not just Nick Fuentes, but there's a lot of people like him as well.
Yeah, there's several who are parroting this line.
Had this been treated with what I think was the correct response, regardless of the fact that I strongly dislike Kirk and everything that he stands for. Yeah. He had a very public funeral. And I remember reading and listening to the coverage of the funeral, which was split between people who were mourning him and then the political side where people were using this as a galvanizing martyrdom moment, including people like Nick Fuentes.
Yes.
And there's been a lot of
definitely took
public
advantage
momentum of like, let's use this to make our point.
Absolutely.
So, as you were saying.
So you recall, I grew up mostly in a tiny little nothing place of about 11,000 people in the Bible Belt. It's a very rural community, quite isolated. And it's the perfect place for theories like this to take hold, where people are already very wary of all these national institutions that seem to have done nothing for them. And it does kind of feel that way when you live out in the sticks like that. And even though it sounds absurd to most of us, and there's really not that many folks out there who actually believe the type of theories Fuentes is peddling, the truth is they have outsized political influence because of the Electoral College and Senate representation. Their votes actually matter a lot of the time. And I get the feeling they are getting pulled to even further ideological extremes. Now, before I continue, can you real quick give me your impression on Nick Fuentes?
Nick Fuentes is like a teabag for the far-right movement, meaning like a lot of the really toxic ideas that you feel are coming out of that movement probably are, I don't know that he's the first person who started saying them, but he's definitely a huge proponent of them. I first heard him introduced as somebody who stuck out from other far-right commentators for his blatant and cruel racism. One of my favorite reporters, Jane Coaston, who covers the far-right, once asked him about multiple things, and he told her some horrific things, including like ideas along the line of like interracial marriage was akin to making love to an animal because you were that incompatible.
That's so when I say that's how I was produced.
When I say like outsized racism, I mean ideas like this that are like truly horrific, peddling ideas like people and especially like crazy anti-Semitism that like Jewish people need to be mass killed off. Support for Hitler. Like so I don't mention these to try to give these ideas traction, but when we say like extremely virulent, extremely toxic far right, that is Nick Fuentes.
The short summary on Fuentes for any listeners who aren't familiar, and I'm happy for you if you aren't, he is like a very, very far-right political commentator and a white nationalist. He's known for anti-Semitic, homophobic, and generally extremist rhetoric, like Amanda was describing.
Everything else.
He has quite a large online following. They call themselves Groypers. And he has some fringe conservative supporters as well. And once upon a time, he even had an audience with U.S. President Donald Trump back in 2022 at Mar-a-Lago. While he's mostly irrelevant to anyone normal, Fuentes' visibility and his audience have grown since Kirk's assassination. And in October of this year, former Fox News host and major conservative pundit Tucker Carlson interviewed him on his podcast. And although Carlson faced some backlash for this, Trump actually defended his right to talk to whoever he wants. Neither of them have been outright supportive of Fuentes, but platforming the guy to begin with is a pretty eyebrow-raising move. So how do you think Fuentes' increased visibility since Kirk's shooting, his contact with prominent conservatives, how is this going to impact right-wing politics moving forward, if it will at all? Do you think that Fuentes will really, for real, be able to get his foot in the door, politically speaking?
I think he has.
You think so?
I think he already has. But if I could remove myself from my personal lived experience and from the fact that this person's terrible ideas are shaping politics, I would say that this is an interesting case study instead of just sort of a disheartening or disparaging case study, because he's so far right that a lot of people that we associate with the far right movement, including, for example, Candace Owens, until recently, now she's sort of embraced a lot of his ideas. Tucker Carlson, a lot of other people that we see in far right media or right media did not want to platform him or discuss him or bring him up because of, again, like these incredibly toxic ideas.
It's just too much.
It was even too much for them. That said, that is no longer the case. Tucker Carlson decided to debate him, and something relevant. I also don't like Tucker Carlson, but let's look at his show for a second. Tucker Carlson can really eviscerate people
He can.
when he wants to.
Yeah.
And you can compare this to like he talked to, I think it was Ted Cruz, and where he
Oh, yeah.
asked Ted Cruz, like,
He laid
hey,
him out.
you love to talk about Iran. Tell me any facts about
He
Iran.
laid him out. Yeah.
Right?
And you know what? I don't care for Carlson myself, but when you actually read some of his ideas, his beliefs, his criticisms, he's not entirely wrong until the very end when he blames everything on immigrants.
Right.
And you're like, where did that come from? But, you know, you almost agree with him all the way up until the end in some cases.
And that's the thing. And
He's no idiot, really.
I think it's important when we talk about these people, including people and especially actually people that we dislike, that just because we dislike them, we cannot discount the skills that they have because
Totally.
that's how they get to the places they are.
Definitely.
Tucker Carlson, as an interviewer, has the ability to really lay into people and to really hold their feet to the fire and make them explain themselves.
Yeah,
that is
he's
not
pretty good at it.
what he did with Nick
Yeah,
Fuentes.
he just kind of
He
let
gave
him
him an incredibly softball
Yeah.
interview when you go through and you look at it. And that includes like, why not investigate? Like, hey, you said that you're like a Christian or a nationalist, but you also espouse all of these horrific things.
Yeah.
What does that mean? A lot of those like hard-hitting questions were just sort of like waved away.
You know, I kind of get the
Kind of
feeling
like laughed away.
he was almost treating Fuentes like a curiosity, but it also had the effect of like, why aren't you really like actually engaging with this dude?
Why aren't you? And I think
'Cause
that's
I know
a
you
question we should
can't.
ask. Why
Yeah.
aren't you actually really asking
Yeah.
this man questions? Like, why aren't you really investigating him? Especially, why aren't you holding his feet to the fire in the same way that you did for other people? But his views are seeping into the far right.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
those views are extremely dangerous, extremely extremist. And there's this idea that I've been thinking about a lot this year of like the availability principle. Basically, that idea that the more that you see something, the more normalized it gets, and the more normalized a reaction it seems.
That's the word I was driving at, normalized. This is normalizing some extreme ideas within the conservative wing of thought.
So if we give him a platform of any legitimacy, then we need to be doing so in a way that doesn't encourage or frame in any positive way these things that he's saying.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think Fuentes has what it takes to become mainstream in the GOP. Honestly, partly because he doesn't have the look. You know how it is with the GOP. You gotta have the look. With any politics, any politician, you gotta have the look. And I think on that basis alone, and the fact that he's just not very likable, that will probably keep him out of the mainstream. But he continues to have outsized power in shaping the narrative behind the scenes.
I would also say, even if he's not mainstream, even a dilution of his ideas is very dangerous.
I think so
and
too.
like, let's take, for example, like his ideas on anti-Semitism. Most people would agree that we should not be like harming people on the basis of their heritage.
Sure.
Right? Like, you shouldn't be like ethno-religious heritage. Ethno-religious heritage. Right? We should not be physically harming large groups of people because they're Jewish. But a dilution of that idea might be, I don't trust people who are Jewish. Or I just don't think, like, maybe there's some sort of religious tie that would mean that we can't get along.
Yeah.
And those dilutions are still very dangerous because that invites you.
Culturally incompatible is the phrase I see a lot.
Yes. And that dilution is still dangerous.
Yeah. That's why the Charlie Kirk's assassination really was the story that stuck with me this year, because it feels like it could be a watershed moment for conservative ideology in general. It's made everybody start thinking in more extreme ways, I feel.
I think it was. I think it was. I think it's a really good example of a news story that stuck out to you. I really think it was already a watershed moment, and I don't know that we're going to know the full ripple effect of it
It remains to be seen.
We can look back.
Well, that's it for today's news report. We'll be continuing with our year-end recap next week with Amanda at the helm. A quick reminder that you can find all of our referenced articles in the show notes for today's episode. I'm Hanna Belinsky.
I'm Amanda Stevens.
Thanks for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling and touch grass. We'll see you next week.
Bye.